Somewhere in Virginia, about 1856, Helen Douglas Stewart presented her husband, William, with a baby boy, and the couple, natives of Scotland, named the new son Calvin Edward. Efforts to learn more than these meager details about Stewart's early home life have mostly met with failure. But we can glean from his recorded words that he was born on a farm, attended school a few years, and left home at the tender age of 12. Cal Stewart said he left his native state, Virginia, in 1872 and began his professional career with B.F. Macaulay, who was playing the part of Uncle Daniel in a play, The Messenger from Jarvis section. I was the village boy, Stewart said in a 1904 interview with the Portland Advertiser, but I understudied Mr. Macaulay for several years, and since then I've devoted my time to old age characters, and I like them best. During the closing 30 years of the 19th century, Cal Stewart worked in many occupations, but his first love was show business, and especially show business which brought laughter to his audience. His philosophy is told in the words of the laughing and lovable Uncle Josh is, "I'd sooner tell Pete on the last day about the laughs I've given folks on earth than try to explain about giving them heartaches." Stewart recorded for most of the record companies in the late 1890s and early 1900s, but most of his some 120 stories, songs, and comic productions were made for Columbia, Edison, and Victor. In the early years, Uncle Josh's laughter had a cackling sound, as demonstrated on the first record selection in this hour, but by the turn of the century he acquired a warm and rolling laughter. The recordings in this hour with Uncle Josh are a kaleidoscope, progressing from a sample of Stewart's earliest efforts through his late 1919 recording sessions for Columbia. An effort has been made to choose titles which are not frequently heard. While en route to his home in Tipton, Indiana in late 1919, Stewart had a stroke on the train. He died on December the 7th at Cook County Hospital in Chicago. His body was cremated, and the ashes were buried in Fairview Cemetery at Tipton. And now, Uncle Josh Through the Years, a collection of rare and infrequently heard recordings by the old master himself, Cal Stewart. One of the lesser-known companies, Hawthorne and Schiebel, in 1898 or 1899, produced 26 5-inch diameter high-grade master cylinders. 3 of the titles shown in the list of 26 have never been found: Uncle Josh's Visit to Philadelphia, The Christening of a Chicken, a Hebrew story, and Hogan Out of Work, an Irish story. 2 samples of these early Hawthorne and Schiebel masters have been discovered on Champion 120 RPM small cylinders, which we assume were dubbed from the 5-inch masters. These are Uncle Josh Has a Game of Ball and Uncle Josh's comments on the sign seen in New York City. The latter of these, number C112, follows. Notice that the name of the record company is omitted in the opening announcement, and also listen to the cackling and abundant laughter found only on pre-1900 Stewart recordings.
Uncle Josh Weathersby's comments upon the signs seen in New York City, an original Yankee story by Mr. Cal Stewart. Well, sir, I've been looking around since I've been here in New York. I must say you have some of the darndest funniest signs here I ever read in my life. I was walking along down the street here the other day. I seen a sign in front of a place that said quick lunch. I went inside there to get something to eat. Darn if I don't believe that sign is all right. It only took me about 2 minutes to eat up what I had to pay $1.75 for. And if that ain't quick lunch, I'll be darned if ever I've seen any. Well, sir, I've seen some awful funny signs in that restaurant, lunchroom, or whatever it was. I seen one sign up on the wall that said, "Put your trust in the Lord. Right under it, I seen another sign. Said, try our mince pies. I tried one of them. I come to the conclusion that sign was all right. Fellow was going to eat many of them mince pies. He'd want to put his trust in the Lord or somebody else. Well, I got to looking over the different signs of what they had to eat. I saw one sign said Irish lamb, 15 cents. Darn if I know that an Irish lamb was different from any other kind of a lamb. Maybe it had green wool on it, I don't know. I went out of there and I went to walking up along the street. I come to a store, I guess it was a fireworks store, as near as I can make out. Had a lot of red, white, and blue, yellow, and green lights on it. Looked darn pretty to me, and I stood there looking at the window, the different things there was there. I seen one sign in the window says, frog in your throat, 10 cents. Any feller put that sign up must be crazy. I wouldn't put a frog in my throat for $10. I walked on a little ways further. I come to another sign, and darn if I didn't have to laugh. Says boots blacked upon the inside. Any fella that'd have his boots blacked on the inside, he's either a darn fool or he hasn't got no respect for his socks. I wouldn't have mine blacked on the inside. Darn if I don't get my boots blacked on the outside.
Some of the titles during the pre-1900 period are interesting, and not all have survived the ravages of time. As we look at the Edison list of this era, we survey such rare titles as Uncle Josh in a Raines Law Hotel, Uncle Josh at the Stock Exchange, the Pumpkin Center and Pawpaw Valley Railroad, Uncle Josh at the Weather Bureau, Uncle Josh in a police court, Uncle Josh on the Spanish Question, Uncle Josh and the Bunco Steers, Uncle Josh at the Statue of Liberty, There Ain't a Word, and Uncle Sam to George. These are from a total of 48 different titles issued by the National Phonograph Company between 1898 and 1910. Pre-1900 cylinders were recorded at a speed of 120 revolutions per minute and played for approximately 3 minutes. After 1900, some of these early titles were remade by Stewart on the gold-molded 160 RPM cylinders, which played about 2 minutes. And it was necessary to delete some of the script which he had included in the longer-playing brown wax records. We include a sample of the 120 RPM cylinders for the next selection. We regret the level of noise in the background. However, considering that this recording is over 75 years old, and was issued on soft, fragile, and mold-susceptible brown wax, it has survived in excellent condition. Number 3895, Uncle Josh Weathersby in a police court.
Uncle Josh Weathersby in a police court, an original Yankee story by Mr. Charles Stewart. That is on record. Well, sir, I never was in a town in my life. Had as many different courthouses in it as New York City has got. Just looked to me like every judge in New York had a courthouse of his own, and most of them courthouses seem to be alongside of some market house. There's the Jefferson Market Court, the Essex Market Court, and several other courts and markets and courts I don't know anything about. Well, I used to be justice of the peace down home at Pumpkin Center, and I felt a little anxious to see how you handle law and justice here in New York City. So, other morning, I went down to one of them courthouses, and I'll tell you, it was a sight. They had all kinds of nationalities in there: Norwegians, Swedes, Germans, Hebrews, Scandinavians, Irish, Yankees, women, children, colored folks, and dogs. The judge, he was sitting up behind the bench, hollering, $10, 10 days, Blackwell's Island, Geary Society, Foundling Asylum, case dismissed, bring in the next prisoner, and the Lord knows what else. Well, some of the cases that tried in that courthouse that morning just made me snicker right out. They brought in one little Irishman, and the judge says, well, prisoner, what is your name? The prisoner says, Judge, Your Honor, my name is McGinnis. He says, well, Mr. McGinnis, what is your occupation? The little Irishman says, Judge, Your Honor, I am a sailor. The judge looked at him for a minute, and he says, well, Mr. McGinnis, you don't look to me, sir, as though you ever saw a ship in your life. And the little Irishman looked up at the judge, and he says, well, now, Judge, Your Honor, if I never saw a ship in my life, do you think I come over from Ireland in a wagon? The judge said, dismiss, bring in the next prisoner. Well, next prisoner what they brought in, he had a sort of an impediment in his speech, and the way he stuttered just beat all. The judge says, well, prisoner, what is your name? The prisoner says, Judge, Mama, my name is, the judge says, never mind, sir, that'll do. Officer, what is this prisoner charged with? And the officer says, well, Judge, Your Honor, McGutter, the way he talks sounds to me like he might be charged with seltzer water. I got to laughing, so I had to get right out of the courthouse.
In 1902, Edison began production of cylinders by the gold molded process. This permitted the manufacture of records composed of harder wax. These records revolved at 160 RPMs, which became the standard speed of all cylinders for home entertainment. The following selection from this period is one of the aforementioned rare titles which Stewart remade for the gold-molded process. Notice the improved quality of sound on number 3900.
Uncle Joyce Weathersby and the Bunko Steers, made by Mr. Cal Stewart, Eddie's on record. Well, sir, when I left home, come down here to New York City, my folks told me if I didn't look out, I'd be buncoed before I was here 3 days. Well, sir, I got the best of them a little bit. I've been here a whole week before they buncoed me. Well, the other day I was walking down through this place, what you call Union Square, and I met a feller. He had sort of a uniform on. Told me he was a soldier, been out to Manila fighting them Filipino fellers, and if I had a little time to spare, he'd show me just how Uncle Sam's boys was fooling old Aguinaldo. Well, I sat down on a bench with him, and he pulled out 3 little shells. They were painted red, white, and blue. One of them was loaded, and the other 2 was empty. Well, he mixed them all up, wanted to bet me $5. I couldn't pick out the loaded one. Well, now, I noticed I had to bet to him, because I noticed that loaded one was painted blue. Well, I bet him $5 and picked out the blue one, and it didn't have a doggone thing in it. I said, buncoed by gosh. Well, I went walking along down the street, and all at once a fella come running up, just tickled to death to see me. He said, why, Mr. White, how do you do? When did you come to town? How's all the folks in Oswego? I said, now, look here, young feller. I don't know you. My name ain't White, and I never seen Oswego. He said, why, ain't you Mr. White from Oswego? I said, no, sir. My name's Smith. I'm from Syracuse. Well, I went walking along, and I just got around the corner, and up come another feller, and he just grabbed me by both hands. He says, well, my old friend Smith, how do you do? How's all the folks in Syracuse? I said, now, look here, young fella, you got the wrong pig by the ear. I don't know you. My name ain't Smith, and I never seen Syracuse. He says, why, ain't you Mr. Smith from Syracuse? I says, no, sir. My name's White. I'm from Oswego. No more bunco for your Uncle Joy.
In order to break into the field of disc production, the Columbia Phonograph Company founded a subsidiary firm, the Universal Talking Machine Company, in 1899, which began to manufacture 7-inch Zonophone disc records similar to those of the Berliner Gramophone Company. These records were quite noisy, and the following selection is typical of those discs surviving in good condition. Number 9190, Uncle Josh at Delmonico's. The speed of this disc is about 65 RPMs, and it plays approximately 2 minutes.
Uncle Joyce at Delmonico's, made by Mr. Cal Stewart. Zonophone record.
Well, gee whiz, I'd hear tell a whole lot at various times about that boarding house you got here in New York called Mr. Delmonico's, and I got a fella to show me where it was, and when I got on the inside, I don't suppose I was ever more stuck back in my life. I couldn't tell whether it was a high-toned society festival or a camp meeting at feeding time. They had flowers and birds everywhere. About 150 patent windmills were running, and out in the woods they had a band a-playing someplace. Well, one fella come up to me and commenced talking some foreign language I didn't know anything about. Something about Bon Shower, Well, I just made up my mind he was one of them bunco fellers, and I wouldn't talk to him. And another fella come up wanting to know if I'd have my dinner. Table G Hotel or all over a card. And I told him if it was just the same to him, he could bring me my dinner on a plate. Well, he handed me a program of the dinner, and I had about halfway down it, drank a bottle of cider pop what he gave me, and it got into my head, and I never felt so doggone good in all my life. I got to singing, I danced old Dan Tucker right there in the dining room. I hugged 3 or 4 of the hired hands and took a raffle out of Mr. Bon Shower, Well, they called in a lot of constables, and it cost me $16.75, and then they took me out a riding in a little blue wagon with a bell on it, and they kept ringing the bell every foot of the way to let folks know I was one of Mr. Delmonico's new boarders.
In 1900, Eldridge R. Johnson purchased the Berliner Gramophone Company's patent rights in the United States, and then founded the Victor Talking Machine Company in 1901. The first records issued by this firm were 10-inch discs numbered in the 3000s. These Victor Monarch discs do not have the familiar dog nipper, leaning an ear toward the gramophone, and are commonly called pre-dog Victors. The record surface was rough, and the needle noise is prominent. Cal Stewart recorded 8 selections on this series of pre-dog Victors in 1901 and 1902, which are numbered consecutively between 3095 and 3102. The selection is number 3101, Uncle Josh in a department store.
Uncle Joe H. Weathersby in a department store by Mr. Cal Stewart. Well, sir, I said to Felix the other day, now, where can I find one of them stores where they got put in here everything to sell what there is on earth? And he says, I guess you mean a department store, don't you? I said, well, now, I don't know. They may sell departments down to one of them stores, but what I want to get is some muslin, some calico. Well, he showed me which way to go, and I started out. I was walking along down the street when some fella throwed a banana peeling on the sidewalk. Well, now, I don't think very much of the man what throws a banana peeling on the sidewalk, nor I don't think very much of the banana peeling what throws a man on the sidewalk neither. My foot hit that banana peeling. I went up in the air and come down to clunk, and just as I was picking myself up, little boy come running across the street, and he said, oh, Mr. Countryman, won't you please do that again? My mother didn't see you do it. Well, doggone that little rascal, I wish I could have got my hands on him for just about a minute. Well, I found one of them stores, and I got on the inside, told the fella what I wanted, and he sent me over to a red-headed girl, and she sent me over to a bald-headed fella. Said he didn't have anything to do, only walk the floor and answer questions. And I went up to him. I said, mister, I'm sort of strange around here. Wish you'd show me around till I do a little bargaining. And he said, you go on. You've got hayseed in your hair. Well, I looked up at that bald head of his, and I said, well, now, you ain't got any hayseed in your hair, have you? Well, he showed me around, and I bought what I wanted. And when I come to pay the fella what I had to pay, it acted just a little bit suspicious to me. Didn't look as though I was going to get any of my money back. I handed him a $10 bill, and he took and put it in a little basket and hitched it onto a wire, and doggone thing commenced to running all over the store. Well, now, you just bet your boots I lit out right after it. I chased it up one side and down the other. I knocked down 5 or 6 sales ladies and 3 or 4 bargain counters, and somebody commenced to holler and cash, and I said, yep, that's what I'm after. I cut up to it, but when I did, I was back where I started from, and they was all standing there laughing at me.
Victor renumbered the 3000 series in 1903 with a new and improved record surface. This new series began with the number 1 and continued through the upper 5000s prior to beginning the double-disc issues in 1908. Most discs recorded before 1904 contained a spoken announcement which identified the title and artist. However, in 1903, Stewart signed an exclusive contract with Columbia, and thus was not available for Victor and the other recording companies during the next 3 years. But he had recorded 33 records for Victor, which were issued on numbers between 659 and 2660, and Victor continued to issue records through the years of Stewart's exclusive contract. Finally, Stewart ended his contract with Columbia and returned to the studios of Victor, Edison, and a host of other firms. The following selection is from a master recorded for Victor after 1906. It bears a number originally used in 1903, but notice that the spoken announcement is missing, indicating that it is definitely a record pressed from a remade master after Stewart's contract with Columbia expired. The story is entitled A Meeting of the Ananias Club, so named from the New Testament figure who was struck mortally for making a false statement, and the issue number is 1476.
Well, one day last summer, we was all sitting around Ezra Hoskins' grocery store, and we got to talking about echoes, and one feller said down where he was born and raised, there was 7 hills that sort of come together, and you couldn't get out there and talk louder in a whisper on account of the echo, but a summer boarder said he wasn't afraid of any darned old echo that ever was created. Well, sir, he went out there and hollered just as loud as he could holler, and he started an echo to going, and it hit one hill and bounced off and hit another and over onto another hill and back around and it got where it started from and hit a stone quarry and knocked off a piece of stone and hit that feller in the head that he didn't come to for over 3 hours. Well, nobody said anything for quite a spell, and Jim Lawson said, well, down where he was raised, there used to be a very peculiar echo, and it was funny how folks used it. Jim said when he come home at night and wanted to get up the next morning at 7 o'clock, he just put his head out the window and said, Jim Lawson, 7 o'clock, time to get up. And he started that darned echo to go, and then it didn't get around till the next morning and said at 7 o'clock, Jim Lawson, get up. Well, old Deacon Witherspoon, he said he didn't know very much about echoes, but he'd seen some mighty peculiar weather. He calculated he'd seen it rain just about as hard as anybody ever see it rain. And somebody said, well, Deacon, how hard did you ever see it rain? He said, well, one summer down it got to raining, and we had an old cider barrel laying out in the yard, had both heads out of it and the bunghole up, and it rained so darn hard into that bunghole, water couldn't run out of both ends of the barrel fast enough, and it swelled up and busted. Well, we thought that was pretty good for a deacon. Well, Ezra Hoskins says he never see it rain very hard, but he'd seen some mighty dry weather, and somebody says, Ezra, how dry did you ever see it get? He said, well, one time when I was living out in Kansas, it got so dry that fishes swimming up the creek left a cloud of dust behind them. Well, Reuben Hendricks says he never see it get very rainy or never get very dry, but he calculated he'd seen as cold weather as any of them, and somebody said, well, Reuben, How cold did you ever see it get? And Reuben said, well, one time when I was living down Nantucket way one winter, it got so tarnation cold along about a hog killing time. We had a kettle of boiling water sitting on the stove, and we started out of doors to cool off, and it froze so doggone quick the ice was hot. By gosh, that busted up the meeting.
And now we will listen to an extremely rare record issued by the short-lived Lambert Company. It is a 5-inch diameter molded black celluloid cylinder. The company produced records from 1900 to 1905, at which time it was forced into bankruptcy by the larger record firms. Lambert was the first company to manufacture molded cylinders. Most of their cylinders were the small type, but some 5-inch cylinders were issued. Stewart probably recorded the following cylinder in 1901 or 1902, and it is interesting to note that he worked alone, playing all 3 parts: Uncle Josh, Henry the nephew, and the policeman in this issue, number 119.
Uncle Josh Weathersby on an automobile by Mr. Carroll Stewart, Lambert Records. Hey, Henry, who's that fellow with a coal bucket and blinders on? That's the chauffeur, Uncle. Well, now you just tell Mr. Chauffeur to run a little mite slow. I ain't used to riding in one of these here benzine buggies. Well, that's all right, Uncle. Get in. Well, you tell him I want to get by today. I don't want to catch up to yesterday. Well, here we go, Uncle. Say, Henry, start going pretty nice, don't it? This beats riding on the tears all this thunder. Say, Henry, I think there's a wagon in the road. Well, let them see us. We don't have to see them. By gosh, we are a-going. Say, Henry, I think we run over a man back there. Well, there's a courthouse up here a ways. We'll stop and pay a fine. Well, now I ain't anxious to get in the courthouse, and I ain't anxious to pay no fine, neither. Well, by Scudder. Say, Henry, what town was that we went by? That was New Haven. Well, now, I didn't think New Haven was such a little bit of a town. Say, Henry, run a little mite slow. Gosh darn it all, I'm losing my hair. Say, Henry, what was that we jumped over back there? That was the Hudson River, Uncle. Well, by God. Say, Henry, what state are we in now? I think we are in Pennsylvania. Yeah, take this darn old kerosene wagon off of me. I ought to have better sense and ride out in it in the first place. Say, Henry, ain't that my eyes are on the dashboard? No, that's one of my ears. Say, Henry, what become of that Chauffeur fella? That's him up there in a tree. Say, Henry, what was that went by? That's our shadow just caught up to us. Come on here now, you fellas. Get all arrested for outrunning the speed limit. I learn you to come out here with your automobile wagon. Come along with me. Say, Henry, what we want now is not to go home.
Another short-lived firm of the early 1900s was the U.S. Everlasting Phonograph Company of Cleveland, Ohio. Their most interesting Uncle Josh records are the 4-minute cylinders, initially recorded by Stewart on 2-minute cylinders or 10-inch disc. With more time needed to fill the 4-minute program, Stewart interjects some new material, though sometimes he merely borrows some part of another one of his old stories to fill the space. The selection for this hour is number 1581, Jim Lawson's Horse Trade. On this cylinder, Stewart adds a bit of new material which tells about the fate of Jim Lawson.
Well, sir, I guess Jim Lawson was calculated to be the best horse trader in Pumpkin Center. Yes, sir, he could set up on a fence and chaw tobacco and whittle a stick and just swap you out of your eye teeth if you'd listen to him. Well, there was a gypsy come along one day, and I guess he just about took all the conceit out of Jim in the way of swapping horses. You see, he traded Jim a mighty fine-looking animal, only he had one very bad fault. Anytime he'd go to ride him, happened to touch him on the sides, and he'd squat right down. Well, Jim knowed if he didn't get rid of that horse, his reputation as a horse trader was forever gone. So he went over to see Deacon Witherspoon. Deacon was old and full of rheumatiz and gouty, kind of hard for him to get around, but he was mighty fond of going a-hunting, and he hunted on horseback. And Jim says, Deacon, I got a horse you ought to have. He's a setter. Deacon says, why, Jim, I never hear tell of such a thing in all of my born days. Bring him over, Jim. I'd like to see him. Jim said, yep, he's trained to set for all kind of game, Deacon. So Jim took the horse over, and they went out a-hunting. They was a-riding along, and Jim saw a rabbit a-setting in the bushes, and he just touched the old horse on the sides, and he squatted right down. Deacon says, well, Jim, what's the matter of your horse? Look what he be a-doing. Jim says, shh, keep still, Deacon. Don't you see that rabbit setting over there in the bushes? Old horse is a-setting of him. Deacon says, well, now, I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. How would you like to trade, Jim? Jim says, I'll trade you, Deacon, $150 to boot. Well, they traded horses, and when they was coming home, they had to ford the creek back to Funkin Center, and when the old horse was wading along through the creek, Deacon went to pull his feet up to keep him from getting wet, and he touched that old critter on the sides, and he shot right down in the creek. Deacon says, now, looky here, Jim, what's the matter with this horse? He ain't a-setting now, be he? Jim says, yes, he is, Deacon. He sees fish in the water. He's trained to set for suckers, same as for rabbits, Deacon. Well, poor Jim is gone now. Yeah, he got drowned in that same creek where the horse seen the fish. Well, when they got Jim out, his clothes was just chock full of fish, and when they took him home, asked his wife where to put him, his wife said, well, you can put the fish in the rainwater barrel, but I guess you better set Jim over again.
Competition was keen just after 1900, and the National Phonograph Company, the producer of Edison records, suffered from the gaining popularity of the disc records and the long-wearing celluloid records. In order to meet this competition, Edison developed a hard wax cylinder with 200 grooves per inch, which played longer than even a 12-inch disc. Cal Stewart had two selections among the first 50 titles announced in 1908. Both were brand-new stories, created especially for Edison and his long-playing 4-minute amber roll cylinders. Number 11, Uncle Josh and the Sailor, and number 43, A Busy Week at Punkin Center.
Uncle Joyce Weathersby and the Sailor by Mr. Cal Stewart, Edison record. Well, through long last spring, down at Punkin Center, farm help was getting a little mite scarce, and I didn't know how I was going to get my plowing or haying done if somebody didn't help me out. Well, while I was thinking about what I'd do in the matter, along come a feller, said he wanted a job. Well, I asked him if he knowed how to work on a farm. He said, yep. He was raised on a farm where the land was so darn poor they
had to fertilize it to make brick, and they planted beans with a shotgun that he got one leg shorter than the other from plowing on side hills. He said he'd been a sailor all his life. Well, I didn't put much stock in him, but I hired him and sat him to plowing with a yoke of oxen down on the South 40, and about a half an hour I heard some of the awfulest cussing I ever heard in all of my born days. Well, I went down in the field to see what was the matter. There was that darn fool sailor standing alongside of them oxen, yelling at them, "Stabbard, gol darn you, Stabbard." Well, I showed him how to turn him around and say gee and haw, and every little while I could hear that feller holler, "Off, port, gee, Stabbard." Well, when dinner time come, I rung the dinner bell, and he stayed right out there plowing. I went out and asked him why he didn't come to dinner, and he said he always come to grub on 8 bells, and I had to go and borrow 7 other bells and ring all 8 of them to get the darn fool to come to dinner. When he come in, I asked him what he'd done with the oxen, and he said he anchored them outside so he could get it tugged and tow them into harbor. Well, true, that feller couldn't get over being a sailor. He called me the captain, Mother the mate, and the rest of the family was the crew, and he called the front yard the quarter deck, and the backyard the poop deck. The cellar was the hold, and the front room was the forecastle, and when Mother scrubbed out the kitchen, he said she was swabbing out the cook's galley. Well, when he come in from the barn with a hatful of eggs, and I asked him where he got 'em, he said he found 'em in the hatchway. He wanted to put a rudder and a compass on the windmill, and when I sent him up in the hayloft to pitch down some hay, he stopped and blowed a whistle and said he was piping all hands aloft. When I sent him to fasten down the cover on the haystack, he said he was furling the mainsail on the hay bark. Well, sir, he talked so darn much sailor, he made me seasick. While he could tell some of the awfulest whoppers. Some of 'em would make old Ananias ashamed of himself. He said his father was a sailor what was shipwrecked at sea, and where it happened was a lot of islands where nothing but mermaids lived, and when they seen his father, they all shook dice to see which one would marry him, and the queen of all the mermaids won his father and married him, and they had 3 children. 2 of them was fish, and the t'other was him. Well, I put up with it all till he wanted me to sit up at night, said, throw water again the side of the house so he could go to sleep, and right then and there, by gosh, I discharged that sailor. A busy week at Funkin Center by Mr. Cal Stewart, Edison record. Well, I think last week was about the busiest week we ever had at Funkin Center. It started right on a Sunday, too. You see, Lige Willett had lost a cow critter, and he met the parson. He said, Parson, I've lost a cow critter, and this being the Lord's Day, I wish you'd announce from the pulpit that I've lost a cow critter, and if any of the neighbors has got one that don't belong to 'em, they'll most likely know as how she's mine. And Parson preached his sermon. Among other things he had to announce was the marriage of Sister Samantha Strosby to Brother Martin Whittlebeck of New Ipswich. Parson says Sister Strosby has been an indefatigable worker in the church, and we'll be sorry to lose her. Her loss will be felt very keenly. And Lige thought the parson was talking about his cow, and he said, Parson, you might tell 'em all so they'll know her. When they see her, she got one ear off. She's branded with a W on the left shoulder, and she's got a poke on to keep her from jumping fences. Well, the next day, I think we had the worst rainstorm we ever had. It rained so darn hard, water got all over the pasture, and the cows waded around in it, and we had to milk them in a boat. After we had them milked, we had to strain the milk 3 or 4 times to get the minis out of it. And the next day we had a meeting of the Temperance Society, and they made Ezra Hoskins president. And just as that Nancy Smith was just about to pin the blue ribbon on Ezra, Cy Pettingill stuck his head in the door and he said, "Ezra, there's a box of books for you down to the depot, and agent wants you to come and get 'em. They're leaking." Then we heard that Jabe Fisher was nigh on to death, and it happened in a funny way. You see, long last spring a fella come along and sold Ezra Hoskins a box of boots, and them boots wasn't nothing but a darn swindle. The uppers was made out of paper, and the soles was pegged on with oats, and he sold a pair of 'em to Jabe, and Jabe wore 'em out in the rain and got 'em wet, and they sprouted, and he couldn't get the darn things off, and he had to go out in the barnyard and let the calf eat 'em off, and the calf bit him on his corn, and blood poison set in, and he come mighty nigh losing his leg. Well, the next day we heard the feller what sold them boots was going to be around again, and we set a trap for him. When he got up to the store, we was all sitting up by the counter. Each one of us had a saucer full of sugar and 5 cents in front of it, and he said, "What you doing?" And Ezra said, "Well, we're just a-playing a little game called Sugar and Fly." And he said, "How do you play it?" And Ezra said, "Well, each one of us gets a saucer full of sugar, puts 5 cents in front of us. First one has a fly light in his saucer, takes all the money." Feller says, "Can I play?" And Ezra said, "Yep, give him a saucer full, Cy." And Cy gave him a saucer full, and that feller lost $25. And then he stuck his finger in it and tasted it, and it was salt. Deacon Witherspoon says, "I calculate this is just about the busiest week we ever had in Pumpkin Center."
In October 1912, Edison announced the blue amberol cylinders, and Stewart was ready with 3 new titles for the first 100 selections. The first of these, number 1507, Town Topics at Pumpkin Center, follows.
Well, sure, everything around the place is upside down, and I can't find a darn thing where I left it. I'm so doggone mad right now. If I bit myself, I'd have hydrophobia. Well, I've been away from home 2 weeks, and when you ain't at home, ain't a thing goes right. I've been down to New York, I have, and do you know that is the doggonest village I ever was in? Gosh, they don't know when to go to bed down there. There's more folks on the street at 2 o'clock in the morning than there is here in our town on Circus Day. They got me in the habit of it, too. One night I didn't go to bed till 7:30. Well, I guess I'll look over the paper and see what they've been doing while I was away from home. If I can find the column it's printed in. Only print one column of the paper here in our town. Rest of it comes already printed. Yeah, here it is. Pumpkin Center Town Topics. Well. Pumpkin Center Ball Club beat Hickory Corners 106 to 97. Gosh, all hemlock. Hank Weaver knocked a fly ball and hit the stained glass window in the Baptist church, and knocked out the four apostles. Now they're going to move the church 'cause it stands so close to the ball ground. It interferes with the game. Well, everybody wanted to whip the Empire, so they loaded the county jail up on a wagon, hauled it out the ball ground, and locked the Empire up in it and let him empire the game out the window. And couldn't a darn one of them get at him. Well, I want to know. Hi Atkins got some wooden nest eggs, and he put them under his old setting hen, and she hatched out 4 blockhead chickens and a woodpecker. Jim Lawson went down to county seat and got his hair cut, and Barbara scared up a woodchuck and 2 flying squirrels. Wow, they ought to let Jim's hair grow and set him over again. Well, Lige Willett has got locomotor ataxia. Now he's got the darn thing. I'll bet he don't know how to run it. Gee whiz. Jim Wilson got some colored Easter eggs, and he wanted to hide them from the children, so he took them out in the barn, put them under the old Plymouth Rock hen, and Rooster come along and looked at him and went over in the next yard and whipped the peacock. Don't it beat all what'll happen when you ain't to hum? I ought to got this paper down New York, but I couldn't find out what post office it was in. They got 200 post offices in New York. Don't you know when you're away from home and among strangers and you don't know anybody, don't it cheer you up just to get a paper from your own hometown? When you're away from home and in a foreign land, you've got the blues just to beat the band. I'll tell you something, drive away that frown. Just get the paper from your own hometown. It tells about the weather and it tells about the crops. All the gossip in the barber shops, and sometimes they print it upside down. Old-fashioned paper from your own hometown. Since children have the measles, Deacon Green has got the gout. Abe Crosby's got religion, and he hasn't found it out. And they've got a brand new baby at the home of Hiram Brown. Some items in the paper from your own hometown. Well, getting along about bedtime, guess I'll shut up.
The remainder of this hour will be devoted to Columbia disc issues. Stewart recorded more titles for Columbia than to any other record firm. 65 separate cylinder selections on 2-minute issues, and 75 discs. The selections which follow are unusual titles, most of them recorded only for the Columbia Graphophone Company between the years of 1902 and 1919. Columbia record number A395, Uncle Josh at the White House, recorded in 1905.
Well, our town went Republican last fall. We had 9 majority. There's 10 votes in the town. Would have been unanimous, but Ezra Hoskins is cross-eyed, and darned old fool marked in the wrong place, and his vote went Democratic. Well, Lige Willett, he was our congressman, and I allowed I'd go down to Washington and see Lige. Well, I was riding along on one of them sleeping cars going down there. First time I ever rode in one of them, and when I got up in the morning, I never was so darn tangled up in my life. I lost my socks in that little fish net that got alongside of where you sleep, and then I lost my collar button. Well, I noticed some fellers sleeping there before left the little collar button sticking right inside the wall. I allowed I might as well have it, so got out my knife and started to gouge it out. I had put an eye out, and fellow what had charge of things come up to me, and he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I don't want nothing." He said, "Well, quit ringing the bell." Well, then I went up the end of the car where all the rest of them went to wash their hands and faces, and by gosh, I ain't found out yet how they done it. they had a row of little horse troughs along there, had a pump alongside each one of them, and I went pumping water in one of them darn little troughs and had a hole in the bottom of it and run out faster than I could pump again. Well, I got down to Washington, and there was a darnest lot of fellers there at the depot, and every one of them wanted to carry my carpet bag. I let one colored feller have it. I said, "What's your name?" He says, "My name is George Washington." I said, "All right, George." We started up the street, and they had a parade or something, and we got separated in the crowd, and I got to looking around hollering for George, and fella says, "Who do you want?" I says, "I'm looking for George Washington." He says, "Why, you darn old hayseed, he's been dead 200 years. Well, I got up to the White House, and Teddy, he just come out and grabbed me by both hands. He said, "Why, Joyce Weathersby, how do you do?" "Delighted. I'm pretty busy, so I'll turn you over to the Secretary of the Interior." Well, Secretary of the Interior, he turned me over to the Secretary of the Board on Foreign Missions, and Secretary of the Board on Foreign Missions introduced me to Secretary of Agriculture, and I never did find Lige Willard, but when I got home, I had enough garden seed in my pocket to plant all Pumpkin Center.
Uncle Josh's Troubles in a Hotel. Columbia record number A412, recorded in 1904.
Well, sir, here I am again in trouble as usual. Just looks to me like I can't turn around anymore without getting in trouble of some kind or other. The landlord put me out of the hotel this morning 'cause I left the gas burning all night, and darned old fool had a sign up there not to blow it out. I had the darndest time in that hotel anyhow, guess you ever hear tell on. When I first went there, I told them I wanted to stay a couple of days, and they handed me out a book and a pen and ink and told me to register. Well, I told them I didn't want to vote, I just wanted to stay in the hotel. Well, I got to looking around, I saw a sign that said safe in the office, and I wanted to be in the safest place, so I stayed in the office. Well, I noticed a little room off to one side. Didn't look as though it'd been occupied very much, only had one little sofa in it. Well, looked kind of comfortable, and I was a little mite tired, and I went in and sat down. Well, fella come along, seen me sitting in there, and he got madder and thunder about it. He just walked in, slammed the door, and grabbed hold of a rope and pulled me room and all upstairs. I found out it wasn't his room, neither. Belonged to some lady in the hotel. I seen her name over the door. Elevator. Well, sir, I went in the dining room to get something to eat for dinner, and they handed me a little program of the dinner. I couldn't read it. They had it printed in some foreign language, so I told them to bring me out whatever they had. I guess I could eat it if the rest of them could, and they brought me out something what they said was Charlotte Russe. Kind of a little shaving mug made out of cake and full of sweetened lather. Well, I had about 7 of them darn things. Didn't fill up worth a cent. Well, then they had something to drink, what they call Champlain. It tasted like cider and smells like horseradish and makes you act like a darn fool. I got to looking around, and I noticed a little machine out in the office. Near as I can remember, I think they called it a graphophone. Well, I got to looking at it, and I noticed on it where it said, "Drop a penny in the place where you put the pennies, and put the tubes in your ears, and you'd hear a feller sing a song or make a speech or do something of that kind." Well, I put them tubes in my ears and dropped in a penny, and just then there was a band commenced to playing around there someplace, and I went out to see where the band was, and I couldn't find the darn thing anywhere, and when I come back in, the machine was stopped, and I didn't get to hear what it had to say. I did have the darndest time at that hotel.
Columbia record number A649, first day of April at Pumpkin Center, recorded in 1906.
Well, sir, it was the first day of April down home at Pumpkin Center, and I never see so many darn fools in all my life.
Just looked like the whole village. It went crazy. Well, I went over to see old Jim Down. He'd been owing me some money, and I calculated I'd call him down. I said to his hired girl, I want to see Down. She says, well, what are you looking up for when you want to see Down? I said, now, looky here. I come over to look up Down. She said, well, you can't look up Down without being cross-eyed, can you? I said, now, looky here. I want to see Down. She said, well, Down ain't up, but when he gets up, he'll be down. Well, just then Mrs. Down come in. She said Down had gone downtown. If I'd go downtown, most likely I'd see Down. If I didn't see Down, why, I could look up Down some other day when Down was down. Then she shut the door and hung out a sign, and on it was April Fool. Well, I was so gosh darn mad. If I'd have bit myself, I'd have had hydrophobia. Well, I started humming. Just I got in front of Ezra Hoskins' store. There was old Deacon Witherspoon's plug hat on the sidewalk, and I hauled off and kicked it, and it had a stone in it, and I mighty nigh broke my foot, and Ezra Hoskins stuck his head out the door and hollered, April Fool. Well, I was just going to tell Ezra what I thought of him when I put my hand on the wire fence, and I got a shock, and I turned about 4 Somersets, and there was Rube Hendricks sticking his head around the corner and hollering, April Fool. Just then Jim Lawson come up. He said, Uncle George, I've been looking all over town for you. There's a tramp hung himself in my barn, and you being coroner, I want you to come and cut him down. Well, I went down there and cut him down, and I was just swearing in a jury when that feller got up and pulled off a lot of false whiskers, and it was Lige Willett, and he said, April Fool. Well, Jim Lawson got to laughing so he swallowed his tobacco and come mighty nigh choking, and I hoped right then he would. Well, just then Cy Pettingill come up all out of breath. He said, hurry up, everybody. Hank Weaver's having a fit right in front of the bus office. Well, we went down there and got Hank and carried him into my house, and Nancy and me worked over him to get him to come to, and I poured whiskey down his throat, good whiskey, and it went down darned easy, too. Well, after I'd poured about a pint down him, he stood up and winked at me and said, April Fool. Well, just then old Jim Down come along, handed me an envelope, said it had my money in it, and I gave him a receipt. And as he was going down the road, I opened it, and it had a lot of old waste paper in it and a card, and on it said, April Fool.
Columbia record number